From inside a radio booth at M&T Bank Stadium, it is the Banner Ravens podcast. Paul Mancano and Jonas Shaffer here to break down a shocking collapse by the Ravens in week 2 of the regular season, falling to the Las Vegas Raiders 26-23. We're going to break down how it all went down here in Baltimore. But first, the Banner Ravens podcast is brought to you by Toyota. Toyota has been building a legacy of excellence for years, from developing hybrid technology to upping the standards of safety and efficiency. Toyota is always innovating, always making progress. And with a superior line of in-stock SUVs, including the adventure-ready RAV4 and capable, affordable Corolla Cross, you can experience the legacy of Toyota for yourself. Visit buyatoyota.com, the official website for deals, to find out more. Toyota, let's go places. Jonas, we're going to discuss just how many ways the Ravens went wrong today in order to lose this ball game 26-23 to the Raiders. But first, got to give us our word of the day, which is
1, 2, 3. Comprehensive.
See, we said it together. That was synergy. I feel like we could have picked synergy. Why'd you pick comprehensive there, Jonas?
Because this was an can we curse on this pod?
Yes.
This was an all-encompassing fuck up. Refs, let's start there. Definitely some questionable flags thrown.
Sure.
But also the coaches messed up. The quarterback messed up. Offensive line messed up. Receivers didn't get open all that often. Defense definitely effed up in that second half.
I like how you censored yourself the second time, not the first time.
And special teams, surprisingly. The thing that we have come to rely on the most in Baltimore definitely effed up more times than was permissible in this game. And that's why the Ravens are 0-2 with a loss to the defending Super Bowl champions, and then a team that no one expected anything from this season.
Comprehensive dictionary.com says is of large scope, covering or involving much, inclusive. That's how it felt today. It felt like every which way that the Ravens could make a mistake, they did. And that's how you lose a game that you were largely in control of. You were up at halftime, come out in the second half, and on your first drive, you score a touchdown. You score a touchdown in the fourth quarter. You had a $16 million running back that you signed to be your finisher. That's how you lose a game at home to a, frankly, worse Vegas Raiders team. A worse quarterback. I think you could say worse talent on defense, aside from Max Crosby being an utter game wrecker in this one. Other than two solid wide receivers and Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers, who may be better than the Ravens' top two guys at wideout.
Brock Bowers, too, had a nice game.
Brock Bowers had a nice game. Still, the Ravens are a more talented team. That's how they lost, is every phase of the game messed up. And Jonas, this felt in so many ways like the game that we were referencing all week leading up to this, which was the last time that Gardner Minshew was at M&T Bank Stadium, which was week 3 of last year. It was a rainy day, and it was a loss to the Colts in overtime, which the Ravens had the lead late. They blew that lead in part because of a ill-timed Zay Flowers fair catch. They go on to overtime, can't get the job done. They lose that game. It felt so much like their first game against the Pittsburgh Steelers last year that they lost 17-10, where the Steelers scored 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter and the Ravens blew the game. It feels like the second Cleveland Browns game, the one where Deshaun Watson got hurt on the field, where Kyle Hamilton opened the game with a pick 6. They were in control the whole game until they weren't, and they lose that game. It feels unfair to say that this has become a trend because they've only lost 4 regular season games last year and 2 so far this year and 1 playoff game in between. So it's not fair to say this is a trend when they win the vast majority of their games. But the way in which they have lost these games, which is a fourth quarter collapse, is certainly an occurrence that is happening over and over again right now.
Yeah, to put this in scope through a Raiders perspective, since the start of the 2013 season, this is from Josh Dubow, the very capable, I think, Raiders quasi beat writer for the AP. They are 2-75 since the start of the 2013 season, when trailing by double digits in the fourth quarter after today. So they had won once in 76 games when they'd enter the fourth quarter down by double digits. This is an incredible burn against Joe Burrow, but also an incredible indictment against this Ravens team. Gardner Minshew now has more wins against Lamar Jackson than Joe Burrow does. I think
It's
Joe Burrow
Minshew mania. That's why it was our word of the day last week.
He's won Joe Burrow's won just the one time against Lamar. Now back-to-back wins in Baltimore.
Yep.
For Gardner Minshew. Obviously, this is a much more talented group of skill position players than he had in Indy last year. The problem last year for the Ravens, besides their offense, was that run game, especially between that run defense beside the 20, just could not stop the Colts attack. But man, I mean, just to feel powerless against Gardner Minshew in Baltimore when you are talking all offseason about how good this secondary can be, about how good this defense can be. And we were just looking at the stats right before we hopped on. This might change with some of the late afternoon games happening, with the Sunday night game yet to occur, with the Monday night game, obviously. But the Ravens, through 2 games, have allowed 514 yards passing. They are the only team in the NFL to have allowed more than 500 yards passing. They are last in the NFL with Marlon Humphrey, Brandon Stevens, Marcus Williams, Kyle Hamilton, Eddie Jackson, Roquan Smith. What we think, and I think, is a more than capable pass rush, but that's just inexplicable considering how well they did last year. Literally the best pass defense in the NFL, and now on a pure gross yardage perspective, easily the worst.
They were without first-round cornerback Nate Wiggins in this game, who
could have used him.
He was in a car accident earlier this week. He is okay. He's doing okay, but John Harbaugh ruled him out for this game a few days ago. He was listed on the injury report with neck/concussion. So could have used him certainly in this game. He played more than a dozen snaps in week 1 against the Chiefs. But one first-round pick, one 21-year-old should not be the difference in stopping a Gardner Minshew-powered offense. The Ravens defense, let's start there, because they held them to 6 points in the first half, 2 field goals. And then in the second half, the first drive of that second half was a conversion on downs. So the Ravens have held them to 6 points through the vast majority of this game. And then the next drives and the final drives for the Raiders went touchdown, field goal, and that's it. What was the cause of the collapse in your mind, Jonas?
Well, the Ravens didn't have many answers themselves, Paul. I wish I did. Certainly, there were some questionable calls. The face mask penalty against Nnamdi Madubuike, even though he just hit his collarbone. There was the questionable pass interference on 4th and long on Brandon.
Third and goal from the 17, where Brandon Stevens had Devontae Adams locked up, and it to me, I mean, that looked like perfect coverage.
Yeah, I only saw part of the TV copy, but it's one of those flags that makes you raise your eyebrow, because the official who's right there on the goal line keeps his hands in his pockets. Meanwhile, the guy 10, 15 yards down the line throws the flag. We asked Eddie Jackson about it post game. He said, I'm not an official, I'm not a ref. I'm not really sure where he was relative to where Brandon Stevens was, but he felt like there were a couple of calls that were, quote, BS. And yeah, but that's, you gotta deal with the BS sometimes. And
right.
There were questionable calls in the first half that went against the Ravens, and that's they should have won this game. I know Derrick Henry said post game the Raiders were the better team, that's why they won. But the Ravens, in so many ways, on paper, through the first 50 minutes of this game, were clearly the better team, and yet it didn't matter because they just shot themselves in the foot at the precisely worst times.
Yeah, you mentioned Derrick Henry, because the offense bears responsibility for this loss as well, going quiet in the final 2 drives, 3 and out on their final 2 offensive drives before that Hail Mary drive. They put up only 9 points in the first half. Derrick Henry was kept to 5 yards on 7 carries in the first half. He had -5 yards through his first 4 carries. And then in the second half, they commit to him. What have we talked about over and over again, Jonas? Derrick Henry is a different kind of back, where he wears down defenses. And only when you commit to him and you consistently give him carries is when he can really make it a defense pay. The Ravens gave this guy $16 million to be a finisher, and he didn't finish the game. Do you think this is flatly more on the offensive line, which was, again, a major problem today? Or was this more on Derrick Henry? Or was this more on Todd Monken for not giving him the ball at the right times?
I don't know. I think it's comprehensive. The blame,
it's everybody.
The blame goes all around. I don't think you could put too much. Well, you can blame Derrick Henry definitely for those 2 false
for the
starts,
2 false
which
starts.
were
Yeah.
big. But again, like,
How many times do you see a running
I
back commit a
know,
false start
especially when it's going to be a tush push play with your tight end.
that they got,
Why
that Charlie Kohler got?
he was asked post game whether there was any confusion with the count, which maybe led him to jump early, and he just said that he was off balance, and that's why he kind of caught himself. But just be on balance. And I don't want to oversimplify it, but what do you have to do there but besides just stand there and then rush to your dude and push him in the butt? That's basic stuff. So I have a hard time, criticizing Derrick Henry for his lack of production in the first game and then the first half, because if you're getting hit behind the line of scrimmage every time, then
Right. What are you
maybe
supposed to
Barry
do?
Sanders is the only guy in the NFL history who could make something out of nothing, but he needs a runway. He needs to get going. And the Ravens, whether it's because of questionable play calling, not a lot of imagination there, whether it's because, this is a weak link line as it is across the NFL where you need everyone to do their job and just give him a crevice to burst through, but just not good enough. And, that tilted the play calling in the Raiders' favor in a way that the Ravens' own stellar run defense could not tip theirs in their favor. I mean, that was the strangest thing, that once the Raiders were able to force the Ravens to pass, it was kind of hit or miss for Lamar. But once the Ravens, throughout the entire game, forced the Raiders to give up the run, the Raiders in that third and fourth quarter had no problem.
Right.
We're just going to dice you. We're going to dice you up. We're going to have Gardner Minshew throw incredible 9 balls down the sideline, torment Marlon Humphrey, Brandon Stevens, pick on Trenton Simpson in space. I mean, this is I don't think anyone on that defense is going to come away from this game feeling good about what they did or like a PFF grade above 60. It's just simple as that. Like maybe, Adafe away and the run stuffers inside, but that back seven. Ugh.
It started out so great because Odafe had 2 sacks in the first 2 Raiders drives, and it felt like similar to the Colts game last year when Kyle Hamilton had 3 first half sacks on Gardner Minshew in the first half. You saw a nice tackle by Brandon Stevens in space on that first Raiders drive. It felt like the defense came out to set the tone. And the Raiders, for the most part, it looked like offensively, up until the fourth quarter, were trying to attack the Ravens side to side, horizontally, because they were too afraid of going over the middle of the field. And it wasn't until late in the game that they really started to attack that middle of the field. And it worked. I mean, that was what worked against the Ravens defense in week 1, is there were so many spaces and gaps right over the heart of the field, which was the strength of the Ravens defense last year, the spine. It was a weakness in week 1, and it seemed like a weakness, at least in the fourth quarter today.
Don't you think they were probably more victimized by those sideline shots?
There were a couple plays down the side. I mean, obviously the pass interference was in the corner. There was the one Devontae Adams also did make a handful of ridiculous catches,
and he should have probably had another. That touchdown would be touchdown catch that he dropped with Brandon Stevens in coverage on that 4th and 2 that they went for. I mean, he's just an incredible player who maybe the Ravens won't trade for if they are out of the playoff mix by the trade deadline.
I did predict before the season that the Ravens would trade for Devontae Adams because I mean that's what a number 1 wide receiver is. Zay Flowers had a really good game today. 7 catches for. Did he finish with 7 catches for 91, or did he have one more before the end of that game, Jonas?
Let's look it up. He had 7 catches for 91 yards.
Yeah, so he finishes with that and a touchdown as well. His first touchdown of the season. Has a nice nod to Jacoby Jones as well on his touchdown celebration. It's very clear that he is the number 1 wideout on this team, and it's very clear that the Ravens can't ask for a whole lot from the combination of Nelson Aguilar and Rashad Bateman.
Not yet. I'm still holding out hope.
You certainly are.
If I can pull it back just slightly to the rushing game.
Yeah.
Just looking at some of the true media splits. Obviously, if you've listened to this podcast before, you've heard me talk about yards before contact per rush. Probably the biggest indictment or credit to how a team is blocking up the run. The Ravens in the first half today, I think less than 0.1 yards before contact per rush. So literally giving Derrick Henry nothing to work with. I think they were 23rd in the NFL for the first half of week 2. You spin that forward to week 2, 3 yards before contact per carry. No surprise there, tied for first. And voila, he rushes 10 times for 75 yards, something like that in the second half. So
Yeah.
it really is just that simple. Can you get these guys running lanes to run to? And they did their job in the first half. They definitely did their job in the third quarter, but they went away from it perhaps a little bit in the fourth quarter, or just didn't find a way to get him loose at the times that they needed to.
Yeah, his first really big run of the game came on his ninth carry, which was a nice, I think, 12-yard gain down the sideline, and amazingly, it happened when the Ravens were running the ball on the side of their most reliable offensive lineman, save for Tyler Linderbaum, which is Ronnie Stanley at left tackle, who is looking like he is back to, for the most part, his old self. You can't say the same about anybody else on that group, except for Tyler Linderbaum, who I think has been okay. I mean,
Yeah, but even him, like on the maybe the first quarter, second quarter, it's a inside run, and he just gets ragdolled on
yeah,
yeah. You don't want to make too much of just one play, but you know, I think he was graded at higher on PFF and the ESPN win rates as a pass blocker than a run blocker, and there haven't really been just again only 2 games so far, but there haven't really been a lot of plays where you know, bring out the pointer and say, "Wow, look at Tyler Linderbaum do that on that run play."
right.
Obviously, that goes back to the whole weak link theory. If you don't have all 5 guys rowing in the same direction, you're probably not going to have a run that you can point Tyler Linderbaum and say he did one hell of a job there. But still, I think a little bit of a disappointing, you know, utilization of this guy who entered in the NFL as this can't miss run blocking
Right.
prospect.
Yeah, I mean, it is the issue with replacing 3 starters along the offensive line is it's not a unit like maybe wide receiver is a unit where one great player can lift an entire unit. If you have a Devontae Adams, he can lift up your entire passing game, and it doesn't quite matter as much who the guys behind him are. On the offensive line, it's the exact opposite. All it takes is one bad performer to lower the floor of everybody else on that offensive line. And I understand the idea behind what the Ravens are doing with Roger Rosengarten with this rotation, having Patrick McCary start the game, bringing in Roger Rosengarten to get him some reps, and then just yanking him and putting Patrick McCary back in there. But it seems like this Ravens team has whoever it is, whether it's McCary or Rosengarten, you don't feel good about right tackle. You certainly feel meh to not great about Andrew Voorhees at left guard, and you feel not great at all about Daniel Falele at right guard. And I can at least see the upside with Andrew Voorhees and with Roger Rosengarten. I'm not sure I see the upside with Daniel Falele, the largest guard in the NFL, simply out of position and not performing well.
It's kind of a miracle that they were able to have some of the success that they did on those pitches to the outside, because usually those are plays where you need your guys to pull out in space, and maybe it was just well designed by Todd Monken, well called by Todd Monken, that it wasn't Daniel Falele pulling into space. It was McCary or Rosengarten, or I think most likely Ronnie Stanley. But on that crucial 1st and 10, the Ravens take over with 4 minutes left. It's just a simple pass rush game where Max Crosby's lined up over the right tackle. He crashes inside. The defensive tackle next to him, maybe it was Christian Wilkins, I'm not sure, gets engaged by Falele, and Falele doesn't see Crosby coming, or doesn't hear from McCary that the stunt is coming, and just holds on for way too long, and they're not able to pass that off like they should have. And Lamar has nowhere to go with the ball. It was frankly almost a little surprising that he held onto the ball, because it looked like he had it right here and kind of collision against his chest. But how often were sacks a drive killer for the Ravens in this game? It felt like every time Max Crosby or whoever it was got to Lamar, if not on that 3rd down play, then a couple plays earlier, that was the beginning of the end for that drive. And in a game that came down to the just 3 points, that might have been the difference.
Yeah. Rosengarten is a rookie, obviously, 2nd-round rookie coming out of Washington. Andrew Voorhees is basically a rookie, had his sort of redshirt year last year. Daniel Falele is a 2022 draftee. This is now his 3rd season. His 2023 season graded out very poorly in a lot of ways, as he was used in a lot of backup roles. At what point do you try to or do you at least consider making a change? You have Ben Cleveland as a backup who could be a backup guard on either spot, maybe maybe a center, as John Harbaugh said.
Maybe Micah Parsons makes that decision for them next week. This is going to be a pissed off Dallas Cowboys defense that got just dog walked today by the freaking New Orleans Saints.
Hey, the Saints, that's 2 good games in a row for the Saints offense.
And you say that as a proud owner of Alvin Kamara on your fantasy,
my fantasy team, yeah.
Beating me today, by the way.
Am I?
Yeah.
Wow.
Listen, I mean, in the same way that Chris Jones kind of calls out matchups, like I'm going to take this guy.
Yep.
Micah Parsons is definitely going to do the same thing. He's not just going to rush against the left tackle or the right tackle. He's going to try to juke you out of your shoes as a guard. And if Vaalele doesn't have the foot speed or the reaction time to hang with him, I think the Ravens should probably have the advantage in the run game, because that's always been the question for this current iteration of the Cowboys defense. But if they are forced into second and longs and third and longs because they can't figure out a way to get Derrick Henry on track, then Vaalele's probably going to be in hell.
That's also what Max Crosby was doing out here today. I mean, that final sack, that absolute killer on Lamar Jackson and their final drive again before the Hail Mary time, that's what Max Crosby had an inside move, and Daniel Vaalele was completely out of position. It was, again, just a dominant pass rusher that's 2 weeks in a row, going to be 3 weeks in a row next week, that is just able to have his way against the Ravens offensive line. And it's just totally stymieing their plans. And whatever plans they may have had for Derrick Henry, they're not able to execute them because of the way that this offensive line has not performed well. But at the same time, you would like to see them at least try to give the ball more to their $16 million running back. That you signed him to be your finisher, and he did not finish today. And I think that's still a major concern, and the blame falls on everybody for that.
Well, let's move to the coaches.
Sure.
Through 2 weeks, power rank the coordinators and head coach John Harbaugh. Who has done the best? Who has done the worst?
I think you could put. Oh man, this is really tough. I don't know. You do yours first, Jonas.
I think you start with Harbs at the top, just because he is the main guy, and I think he's made some bad time management decisions. You think of late in that first half against the Chiefs, where they had to settle for the field goal late because they didn't have enough time. Remember there was they crossed midfield at around with 50 seconds left, rather than taking a timeout right away. They kind of let 20 seconds come off, and then lo and behold, they didn't have enough time to take another shot into the end zone, and they end up losing again by a touchdown. But if Isaiah Likely had made that catch, that would have been a game winner. You spin it forward to today, just disorganization leading to that first challenge flag. The offense was still clearly pissed, or thinking just too focused on the play that had just happened to get ready. And so Harbaugh maybe having a slight hope that play would get overturned. What was the
first challenge?
Yeah.
I'm even racking my brain now. I know the second challenge was on the Devontae Adams catch on the sideline.
Right. Maybe it was a catch or something, but
was it the Zay Flowers almost catch?
Yeah.
It was the ball that
right.
I think pretty clearly hit the ground.
Yeah, you're right. The sliding one.
Yes.
Over there. And so he throws the challenge flag. Everyone in the stadium knows it's not going to get reversed.
Yep.
They spend like 30 seconds looking at it on the monitor, comes back, no good. And then they don't have enough time at the end of that first half to take another shot. Like they kicked a field goal with 7 seconds left. Personally, I thought that was enough to take at least one more shot.
That I disagree with. I saw you tweet that out at Jonas_Shaffer, by the way.
But if you have an earlier timeout, then you have at least
it doesn't matter.
one or two more shots. And then you get to the second half. Obviously, it was going to be tough sledding for the Ravens, regardless of how many timeouts they had when they got the ball with about half a minute left in regulation here. But just having one more timeout means you can, instead of just looking to the sideline, take another shot over the middle.
Right.
The Raiders defense isn't able to pin their ears back and know where you are going with the ball. It was just, John Harbaugh said, you're never going to go undefeated on challenge calls, but this has been perpetually a problem for him, where he just doesn't make the right decision on when to throw the challenge flag.
Yeah. You again, you're never going to go undefeated, but 1 for 2 would be nice. It's the same thing as we didn't sign Derrick Henry to give him 30 carries a game. Okay, but half that would be nice.
And even bigger picture, like the Ravens have a healthy team right now. We're looking at our
Yep.
phone through these games. Cooper Kupp's down, which is, again, bad news from a fantasy team. Jermaine Johnson is down for the Jets. So many big names on so many teams that George Kittle got carted off today have been lost to injury. And obviously not all those teams are doing successful, but the Ravens have a healthy team and they are 0-2 in spite of it.
Well, where were they at this point last year? I mean, they were a much
They didn't have Marlon Humphrey.
Didn't have Marlon Humphrey. I mean, David Ojabo went out very early in the season. Ronnie Stanley gets hurt in the first game, I believe.
Dafe I think rolls an ankle in that Bengals win.
Right. They were very, very hurt at this point last year. It took until midseason for them to be able to get half those guys back. And right now, this is a healthy team that is going through these struggles right now. So did you have John Harbaugh, to go back to your power rankings, at number one as the most to blame?
Most culpable.
Oh, okay. I thought you were power ranking.
No, sorry. I guess I would say, I don't know. Should we just is Todd Monk is not exactly blameless. I thought last week against the Chiefs, to rack up 450 yards was pretty solid. I think he had a decent plan for Max Crosby today with a lot of chips. I think if we want to talk about the Lamar pick, I think that's probably more on Lamar than on Rashad Bateman. Obviously, a lot of it is just good luck, but you look back at the TV broadcast view of that, and Rashad Bateman is running that short hitch route. And if you are throwing a pass in that confined of space, that short of throw, you got to start winding up when that guy starts decelerating, not after he's fully turned to you asking for the ball.
Yep.
And so it's no surprise that when that ball does reach Rashad Bateman's hands, people I'm sure will debate whether or not he should have caught it. It's no surprise that Jacorian Bennett is there to make the pass defense and Robert Spillane is there to clean it up. It's just those are the small details that separate a successful catch from an interception that leads to a Raiders touchdown.
Yeah, and I do still think that they don't fully know what their identity is on offense. I still don't think they know where their bread is buttered. I mean, it's pretty clear that the struggles, it's ironic because we talk so much when the Ravens signed Derrick Henry that, well, look what he could do behind a good offensive line. And yes, his yards per carry the last few years have been dipping down, but that's because that Tennessee offensive line could not block in front of him. And then the Ravens bring him in here behind an offensive line that is missing 3 starters. They don't have a clear X receiver. Zay Flowers is their number 1 receiver, and he's done fine, but he is not a prototypical X receiver by any stretch. Rashad Bateman, after giving him that extension, still hasn't done a whole lot. Nelson Aguilar seems to be the same guy, maybe slightly worse than he was last year because he's getting older. Devontae Walker, 4th-round pick, inactive again, a healthy scratch this week. You don't see a whole lot on offense that you feel like are easy buttons for Lamar Jackson right now or for Todd Monken calling the plays.
Yeah, it's I don't know. One thing that buoyed my confidence for the Ravens going into this game, Todd Monken had mentioned this previously at Thursday's presser, but he felt like there would be less drag on this offense from week 1 to week 2. It was interesting to go back and look. Since 2020, Lamar had been like a little bit less than below average in terms of EPA, total production, all this stuff. You get to week 2, you think of all the great week 2s that he's had. I think like the Dolphins game where they ended up losing in that huge shootout a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
You think about the Bengals game last year where even though they didn't score, boatloads of points, they were really, really efficient against the Bengals defense we thought would be good. And for whatever reason, that just didn't port over today. I mean, his numbers will look fine, I think, if you have him on fantasy or whatever, but just the down-to-down success that we thought would come against an admittedly good Raiders defense. We shouldn't overlook this. They finished top 10 in DVOA last year. They added Christian Wilkins. Antonio Pierce has another year of familiarity, another year of, working with this team to add some new wrinkles, but pretty vanilla in terms of what they run, X's and O's wise. Really shouldn't have baffled the Ravens. And there were just plays where Lamar and everyone else on this offense are going to look back and wonder why they couldn't have done better. It's Lamar overshooting Mark Andrews on that first quarter deep shot where he
Mhm.
probably goes for 30, 40 yards. It's Lamar just kind of aiming the ball at the wrong shoulder that either leads to a completion that was less yards than it should have been, or an incompletion altogether. It's holding calls that were maybe iffy. It's Derrick Henry with the false starts. It's just guys not knowing where to line up. It looked like, I mean, how many plays today were snapped with like 2 or 3 seconds on the play clock?
Yeah.
It's just Todd Monken is not going to be happy when he looks at the game tape, and he's not going to be happy when he talks to us on Thursday. But
he's not going to be happy at you for asking a difficult question. Yeah. I'm sure. Have we talked special teams?
No, let's talk about it,
because we said that they were culpable as well. We did say this was a comprehensive loss.
Bigger cock up. Justin Tucker missing again from 50 yards, or Jordan Stout just going Shankopotamus Rex on that finest.
It's Shankopotamus Rex. I mean, that should be our word of the day. Yeah, that to me, Justin Tucker's issues from beyond 50 yards have become a trend. I think you could say. What is it? 1 for 7 in his last 8 kicks from beyond 50.
Well, 1 for 7 will be his last 7.
But yeah, that's sorry, not 1 and 7.
Get out of your baseball mode, Paul.
Yeah, sorry. Already talk about an F up. And then the punt at the end of the game by Jordan Stout he wasn't backed up in his own end zone.
I watched a lot of college football yesterday, and that was worse than any punt that I saw from a college punter.
That was horrendous. I don't know what the final yardage on it was.
Well, yeah, I mean, they punted around the 20, and the Steelers the Raiders ended up starting over, I think, at their 40 at the Ravens 43. Right. So all they needed was 1 first down to get the field goal range, and maybe not even that, because Daniel Carlson is out here hitting 50-yarders like they're layups.
Yeah. What about what would you have thought if on that final play of the game with 7 seconds left, instead of Lamar scrambling for like 40 yards and then tossing it back to Justice Hill, if they just brought out Justin Tucker?
Redemption
from 75.
I think they would 80. They would have needed to shoot him up with PEDs before that play,
or just aim a lot of fans.
And the special teams started off promisingly enough. There was the nice punt return from Deontay Hardy.
Yeah, 16 yards, I think.
Good coverage on kickoffs. There was the very, very dumb bad call on Chris Board for landing on a guy that got him flagged for a 15-yard penalty. But then there was the return out of the end zone when John Kelly. I don't know why John Kelly
was taking that.
I don't know why he's back there when they have Tylan Wallace, when they have Justice Hill, both guys who have track records of doing productive things with kickoff returns. And he gets the stop sign, or at least it looked like he did, and he runs it out of the end zone, and they start like the 22-yard line or wherever it was.
If watching that live, I think he caught it like at the half-yard line and then went into the end zone and wasn't sure if he would have been able to take the knee without it being a safety. So he just ran it out. But the pause for certain gave him a slower time to start up, and that cost them 10 yards.
I will say the Ravens, it's hard to remember now considering just how they finished up the year, but they were also very bad on special teams to start the season last year. I remember looking at the DVOA rankings, and that they finished, I think, 3rd overall last year, despite just how bad they were to start the year. Should give you hope.
Yeah.
But again, they weren't dropping these kind of games early last year.
Well, they did lose the Colts game.
Yeah.
In week 3. And I think that's...
And I think Tuck missed a couple of long ones in that one too, right?
Yes. And they already, though, had the win against the Bengals under their belt. They had the week 1 win against the Texans under their belt, who Texans ended up being a very good team, even though we didn't think it at the time. They're 0-2 for the first time since 2015. You could look at the silver lining and say...
I don't know if there's a silver lining to any 2015 comparisons, because that team did not make the playoffs.
Yeah. The silver lining, Jonas, is that the Chiefs are the defending Super Bowl champs, and maybe this is just a repeat of the Colts loss last year, which didn't end up meaning a whole lot in the grand scheme of things.
And does the Bengals being currently up 16-10 on the Chiefs make you feel better or worse about how the Ravens played in week 1?
Well, they play the Bengals in 2 weeks anyway, so
yeah. I mean, let's talk about that. What would be at this point? Are you holding to 3-2 going into week 6 is a successful start for this team, because you have a pissed off Cowboys team in Dallas in week 3. You've got a Buffalo Bills team that is injury depleted. They might not have Teron Johnson. They might not have Bernard or Milano. They're 2 very impressive linebackers, but still looking like a wagon. And then you've got the Bengals, I believe, in Cincinnati in week 5.
Yeah, but we're also talking about the Bengals, who lost embarrassingly in week 1. the Cowboys, who they're pissed off because they just got boat raced, uh, and the Bills, who nearly lost in Week 1 in embarrassing fashion. So I think I see weaknesses in those 3 teams that we didn't see coming into the
But
season.
where do the Ravens need to be for you to stop bringing
I
the
mean,
panic alarm?
I'd like for them to be 3-2, but that would require winning their next 3. I mean, they have to win at least. I would think they have to win at least 2 of these 3.
Yeah,
Wouldn't you?
then the schedule eases up a little bit.
Yeah.
There's definitely a soft middle to
Yeah, it's like the
to this Ravens
Commanders, I
schedule.
believe. After that, you could really rack up some wins in October and November, but you don't want to be, 2-3 going in ideally, but that's if you win 2 of the next 3, you're going to be 2-3.
Yeah, it's a tough spot. You got a question. I don't know. It's always a thorny issue when you invoke the notion of leadership on this team, because Lamar is always who he is. He's just like steady as a heartbeat. He's going to be the same whether they win or they lose. But I think this offense needs someone to take charge in a vocal way and say, we need to do this, or Dana Filele, we are counting on you in a way that I cannot even begin to explain to you. On defense, obviously, Roquan is Roquan. You see him breaking down the team before the game. No question about his vocal leadership and just the kind of acumen he brings to that team. But this is a group that it's going to have to ultimately be player led. But when you think about just the units on this team that have disappointed, and in a lot of cases, the new coaches who are overseeing those units, I think there is some overlap there. Linebackers have not been great. New coach there. DBs have not been great. They lost to Nardo Wilson. Obviously, they still have Chris Hewitt. It's obviously Joe D. May he rest in peace. We don't know that he was going to work any kind of miracles with this group, but there are still a lot of moving parts on this offense and defense. Not necessarily special teams, but you need some stuff to settle in, or otherwise it's just going to be one spinning plate after another that you're trying to get your hands around.
And what you don't want is for this to become a referendum on their offseason as well, because so far the early returns on Derrick Henry, not particularly promising. Again, not all his fault. The draft class has been largely invisible. Also not everybody's. It's hard to assign blame to one person in particular for that. They've suffered some injuries. They've had some bad luck, but draft class is yet to contribute. And the offensive game plan coming into for the offseason was, we're just going to replace those 3 starters on the offensive line in-house. And that's what we're sitting with right now, is an offseason that has not been looked particularly fruitful through 2 weeks.
Yeah, sure. I think to circle back to the coordinators, I think you need a little bit more imagination on offense. You don't want just Zay Flowers getting in motion. You know what I mean? It's like if anyone's in motion, it's Zay Flowers. Yeah, I think you can put Rashad Bateman and get him some free releases. On defense, the pass rush I think was good today until that fourth quarter, and maybe they wore down a little bit. Obviously, having Kyle Van Noy, be able to play in this game was huge.
Almost saved the game on that sack that set up the 3rd and 17.
Yeah,
on that final Raiders drive, I believe. No, the second to last Raiders drive.
Right, but Mike Macdonald last year was so good about mugging up the A gap. Doing all these simulated pressures where the offensive line did not know who was coming. Maybe you give Zach Orr credit for that unblocked Odafe Owe sack in the first quarter. To me, that looked more like just, Colton Miller, the Raiders left tackle, not having a clue of what to do. But it doesn't seem like the easy buttons, to use your language, are there for Zach Orr like they were for Mike Macdonald, which I think we should say was to be expected, because Mike Macdonald also did not have an easy go of it. I think his week 2
was the
Miami Dolphins shootout, where he just had guys dropping left and right and could not stop Tyreek Hill, could not stop Jalen Waddle, could not stop Tua. So there were going to be some growing pains, but for them to happen on this stage against a team that you were 8.5, 9-point favorites in, everyone who was in a survivor league and had not got knocked out by picking the Bengals in week 1 were picking you to beat this Raiders team. Yeah, it's gonna be interesting week in the castle.
You were thinking a lot about fantasy and
I'm not even in a Survivor League.
yeah, Survivor Leagues. I don't know. We're gonna check my fantasy score, and Jonas, you have a long, beautiful article to produce by the end of tonight, which I can't wait to read on the BaltimoreBanner.com, where you can subscribe $1 for 6 months. You're already following Jonas. We know this is true. Follow me at Paul Mancano and at All Banner Sports. And please like, rate, review, subscribe. Write us a good review, and I will read it out here on the show on the Banner Ravens podcast. We will be back on Thursday to preview the Ravens game against the Dallas Cowboys.